how cloud computing is going to be implemented. So in that sense, I think a lot of questions have already been answered. Forecasting how new and emerging technology can be implemented, or what direction that new and emerging technology is going to take is absolutely fraught with danger. Great men have fallen flat doing just that. I remember that in 1943, Thomas Watson, who was then the chairman of IBM, when asked about the future of computers, proclaimed quite grandly that he sees a market of maybe just 5 computers in the entire world. Less than 70 years later, there are at least millions of computers floating around in this world. Millions of mobile phones and smartphones, which are nothing more than smaller computers, and several handheld devices which are also doing the rounds. So in that sense, forecasting about technology is absolutely fraught with danger. But there is also the other danger of going ahead and backing the wrong technology. And here I'll again get back into history and talk about Thomas Alva Edison and Nikola Tesla when they were fighting the electricity war. And Edison was absolutely convinced that direct current is the way to go. But eventually it was alternating current which won. I'm talking about technology because I wanted to place our discussion on cloud computing within this larger framework and understand as to where cloud computing can lead to. Mr. Satyanarayana talked about the fact that there has to be absolutely rapid deployment and scale is something that is very critical in cloud deployment. I'm informed that Jammu and Kashmir has already shown us the way by implementing cloud services for its ration card, death and birth certificate registration and recruitment, taking excess capacity from Madhya Pradesh and implementing it in just 60 days flat with practically no cost. So in that sense, it's something which is really heartwarming. What I would like to do is that we have a very distinguished panel. I would love the panel to go ahead and talk a lot about cloud computing technology and the potential that it has and how it can be utilized for making governance, specifically products and services, accessible to Indians like us. And I would just request each panelist to take approximately 5 minutes each and talk about their vision of cloud computing. And I think we can start with Mr. Ratan, move on to Mr. Krishnan, then Mr. Srivastava, Ms. Verma, and then Mr. Ramaswamy. Mr. Ratan.
And I actually want to put a point slightly different to technology when we're talking about cloud. I think Mr. Satyanarayana touched about that, which is the sort of one thing we heard about the benefits which it can bring about. One of the core benefits of a shared usage of application or reusing an application if we talk about is rapid time to deploy. With probably in my mind a huge benefit which can come as a result of that. What I'm getting at is that the G-Cloud, the technology for that may be there, but we need to create a burning platform for it by sharing applications across states or across departments. That needs to become the real starting point for cloud to succeed. We don't want to probably do cloud for the sake of it. The real business benefit which we will get is reusing of the application which is created by allowing that service to be made available to millions others who are not able to get the benefit of that service today. So if you position it in that context, I think the benefit is immense. So the technology part of it is probably the much easier aspect. You spoke about JNK and I'd like to call it an experiment, having been one of the architects and person who ran that entire experiment. What that proved, when a couple of minutes on that, what that did was, these three services which were running successfully in MP and which had taken about 24 months to implement in MP were replicated in JNK using the multi-tenanted application of MP in less than 45 days with zero incremental cost, as one of the key benefits Mr. Narayana mentioned. So the power of technology to be able to do that is immense. The giver and taker worked initially. Why it failed thereafter, and I'm using a very strong word, having been involved with that, was the politics behind it. Somebody at the sort of the political consensus required to work cross states could not sustain over a longer period of time. So, while sort of there was money made available by DIT to roll it out in a much faster way, while the technology was proven, while MP was willing to sort of provide the platform, that one bottleneck sort of didn't allow it to scale up, and millions of people in JNK not getting the benefit of something which was there. So I think somewhere we need to solve this collaboration problem, the taker problem I call it. In my discussions around this pilot I've had with at least more than a dozen state governments, everybody more than willing to give what they've done where nobody's willing to take. The pride comes in between, how can I take from somebody else? I have done so much better. Tell me, is there a state who is willing to take my application? I'm more than willing to give. This one issue we need to break. And sir, with your commitment, which we sort of heard you talk about this, and I think you are, your persuasion, which we've seen over the last many years, that's one thing. There's nothing wrong if I've done something well, somebody else has done something well. Maybe we can create a barter program versus a give-or-taker program. I'll give you one, you take that, you give me one, I'll take that. So that stigma, again maybe I'm using a strong word, but that stigma of being a recipient, if that goes away, I'm sure sort of the technology will help us do it. But this mindset to break is absolutely crucial. The benefit at the application level, so you spoke about the outcome orientation, are huge. By infrastructure sharing will save some cost. Good for a country like India, but I think over the last few years what I've seen is money has not been the problem, the outcomes have been the problem. So outcomes will come by application sharing, in a real sense, by getting people to work together, barter, and put due emphasis on this aspect. I'm sure technology will not be a reason why we will fail on this, like the whole of the government. So the slower adoption, although a lot has happened, is not because of sort of any of the technology that they have. It's been more towards the soft aspects of the monitoring around that, etc. So that would be my take for rapid deployment. Break that one stigma. Call it one.
Thanks, Neil. And again, when the same kind of discussion happened about a year back, I remember, again, when people were talking technology and all those things, I said the issue is entirely different. And somehow there were not too many echoes around the room. But now when having started it, at least we know what the issue is. It is definitely not technology. What we need to do is to start with saying that we need to share. We need to share, and that's most important. Once that basic thing is put up front that you're going to share, then these things will follow. Today when we are doing GST, we never thought of cloud. We never thought of anything. We said we have to share. And when we said we have to share, it is not sharing that you have a silo here, you have a silo there, and then what do you share? So you have to get together and see if there are separate silos, what can we bring together commonly, what can we share in terms of applications. So you have to start thinking and collaborating in terms of applications, which means that collaboration in any project, suppose you take health or you take tax or municipality, whatever, collaboration should happen at the level of governance. What is it that we decide we give commonly to people, to our stakeholders in this project? So then they collaborate and say, okay, these are the shared set of services. And when that kind of collaboration happens, then you will see automatically collaboration of infrastructure, collaboration of application, all that follows. The problem comes when you start from the technology side and say that I want to collaborate, then it never happens because there is no value that they see in it other than money. And as Neil said, the problem, unfortunately, in this country, as far as e-gov is concerned, today money is not the bottleneck. The other issues which Mr. Satyanarayana said, leadership, institutional structure, they are bigger bottlenecks than probably money. There is money going around, but you don't have people to really conceptualize the project. So, can we create a common platform of collaboration which is built around outcomes, around what we deliver? And from that will come forth the requirement for cloud. To look at it simply, today in GST, why are we thinking of the cloud? We said we will now share a common set of forms and procedures across the states. Then we said let's define a common form. Then states get together and decide what should be the field in the form. So it's a purely governance matter. Then we said okay, we have created a common application, which is a portal. Now how do you change the backend systems to link to this? Then we need to change. Every state wants to change. Now that it wants to change, it says where is the test environment for me to develop and change? So there is no common test environment. Then since they are already coming together, today automatically the thing came, why don't we share a test environment? Why don't we share a test bed? Why don't we share a development environment? And why don't we share the developers? So the need has come from the governments, from what we need to do. The need has not come from technology. Today we are going to cloud. The cloud is not searching for a solution. It is a solution searching for a cloud. And that has made the cloud relevant. So once you start focusing on outcomes, which is what the secretary said, automatically you have outcomes, you have a shared set of outcomes. These collaborators who come together to implement the shared set of outcomes, they will automatically demand shared infrastructure, shared applications. It will just come out of the project because that's the natural way to do it. And then you'll find that it's these people who have the need will come behind the cloud technologies. That's the first part of it. Second, when this happens, there is a challenge which will come. And that has to be attacked in parallel, and you have to think about it. That is, when states have to share, they're all sovereign entities, they all have to share. They, as Neil said, they're all willing to give, but nobody will take, because it means that my data is residing somewhere else. I don't mind giving somebody else's data, but my data should not reside anywhere else. So that's the case. So how do you solve this problem? You say, okay, forget it. It's not your data, it's not this data. Let us create an entity which is collectively owned by all of you. And that is why we came to the concept of National Information Utility, and which was announced by the Finance Minister in the last budget speech. Said, let us create an entity which will host a shared set of applications, a shared set of utilities, which will be the base for the standards across different states for every project. And this, then, is a shared utility, so people don't fight after that. They say, I am going to be in the board of the city. I share, I have an equity in it. So there is a combined ownership in a shared infrastructure and a shared application. And behind that you can have cloud, you can have anything you want, because then they are not going to dispute it is there or here, it is theirs. It belongs to them, it is not us or them at all. It is their own institution. So that is where you need to create an institutional structure where there is partnership, where all the stakeholders are at the same time buyers and sellers. They have to sell themselves, they are sitting on both sides of the table. And when that happens, then there is a complete win-win on all sides. Otherwise, it will always be us and them kind of thing. So, collaboration through first the idea, then collaboration through creating institutions to make this happen, and finally to dot the I's and cross the T's is look at the legal framework. How to create a legal structure where single point of contact, you go, you have a certain set of demands, you place it on this entity, and all that is delivered. And how that is delivered, whether it's a virtualized in the back, cloud, all that automatically falls in place because the buy-in is already there in the other parameters, which are the more critical parameters on the governance side. So once we do that, I think the way forward for the cloud will happen. Interestingly, we have created, when the cloud experiment is going on the technology side, interesting experiments on the institutional building side have also happened, which we are working on. And all that is shareable. This institution that we built, which is going to be shared across the states, similar such institutions can be replicated. And so we can create a shared platform backed by cloud, backed by shared applications, which states and the center can share.
Just add a point to the importance of the institutional framework. The effort, and having worked with Vishnu sir on that, the effort to do this, to get 35 states to agree on one institutional framework, center to agree with that, to iron out sort of ownership issues, governance issues, all of that, has been nearly 18 months journey. It's an 18 months journey, and we are sort of about to come to the final conclusions on that, and the entity will get set up shortly. So, and surely from a technology standpoint, to implement that cloud may not have taken that time. And we tend to think that to be the problem. I think that's the learning which...
So when I today talked to CA, for example, they were talking to me even today. I had a specific problem. I said, can your cloud do this for me? Because now I'm looking for a specific problem which is related to my domain. I'm not generally saying that, I want. And they're working on a specific problem, and that's exciting to everybody because it's directly giving value to the product.
Let me put another perspective on the cloud. I think Mr. Satyanarayan in his own inimitable way gave it a very human face, saying culturally it should work for India because we're used to sharing number of people in the car, number of people who use an internet connection. And he was giving the analogy of how cloud is normally not used in good connotations. So I should say in some ways we should be in India the first to really adopt the cloud, because for a country that so depends on monsoons, who else should adopt the cloud? And in some ways, the cloud as a concept has been there as long as I remember. When I started my career with IBM and you only had mainframes, everybody wanted the cloud. That was called a data center. You wanted to focus on your application and you didn't want to buy the infrastructure. Except there wasn't the need for on-demand computing. There wasn't the sophistication that was needed in management. And there wasn't the technology that allowed you to do it. The good thing today is that we pretty much have the technology. There will be bits and pieces that will keep coming, but we have the technology today for cloud to be a reality. And a few years ago, I know many of us in the IT industry used to get this funny look when people said, oh, is this the next thing that you chaps are starting, like the Y2K? Nobody says that today. And for us, I think it's very critical, some of the things that I was just hearing, very critical for us to get it right, because as a country, we have not yet made the real heavy investments in infrastructure, in IT infrastructure, that the developed world has done. And therefore, we have the most to gain by leveraging cloud at its earliest. So we do not make those heavy investments and then look at how we will actually optimize those investments. So the time for us is right. And the benefit from the cloud, which is inherently that you can focus on the applications, you reduce your cost because you don't have to invest in infrastructure, you can use it optimally. You're much quicker to deployment on time, the urgency which we have. Those are very critical for a country like India, because if you look today, some of our biggest challenges, whether it's public distribution, for example, the leakage in that, whether you look at the fact that we only have about a third as many teachers as we need, or if you look at only half as many people who have affordable access to affordable healthcare. All of these, today technology and application can be used to sort them out for ourselves. But there is urgency, there is limited availability of capital. And so for us to see where all we can leverage cloud is important, because if I look at government, which is taking a big lead in this, there is no government application that really cannot leverage the cloud. And in many ways, compared to other countries, I think it is appropriate that we begin to lead in the different models, in the different structures. I mean, we have a complex country, 35 states and union territories. For us, the ability for what has been done well in one state to be leveraged in another. For us to be very mindful of how optimally we use our infrastructure. For us to look at how fast we can deploy what is needed is more critical than most countries that I know. And therefore it is, I think, very appropriate for us as we go forward, and from what I hear right now and others, is to develop the models that other countries will follow. And I think the institutional frameworks are very key. How do you have vendor neutrality? How do you ensure that there will continue to be interoperability? Because these things, once they get set, become very, very hard to change. So if you simply look at other examples in the US on healthcare, it is so hard in the US now to look at changing this whole thing on health records because there aren't standards. In a country like India, where we haven't really gotten very far, you can actually create standards. So standards on those, standards on how the states will collaborate. For instance, standards on how you will create accountability on people, vendors, and others who supply. Many of these, and then there are several others. How do you create institutional frameworks? How do you create standards? Will determine how successful all of this is going to be. So I would only say, I think, technology is a piece of it, and I think technology providers like CA and many others are clearly making that happen, and I think we have enough today to make it work. Technology always keeps improving, but I think the focus now is on how we build institutional frameworks, how we build governance frameworks, how we build the collaboration frameworks, and really look at how we then make this a reality in real time. Thank you.
Good evening. If you really look at, what are the positives or what are the negatives of cloud, I think we've been discussing this for almost a year and a half. And somewhere we have come to a kind of consensus that the positives of cloud computing definitely outweighs the negatives. So to my mind today, the question is not that whether we should adopt cloud or we should not. We have perhaps moved on to the next thing, which is what kind of cloud model we should adopt in country and particularly in government. Whether we should do private cloud, should we do government cloud, or public cloud, or should we go on to some kind of a hybrid. Again, you can't have a straight answer to this saying this A, B or C. This gets very largely governed or decided to the kind of application you have or the kind of particular service you are trying to launch on cloud. So whether it is your application, how critical is this application? How even if the application is small, how sensitive is the data which this application is handling? Or is this application periodic in nature, that means it has surges which comes like exam results and things like that, where you only need CPU sizes, huge CPU sizes for a very small time. So kind of things which really guide you to pick what kind of and as Sir and many of you have also said that today for us to adopt a public cloud perhaps is there are a lot of open issues which still need to address, whether it is at the technology point and largely at the policy level within the government or the country at the legal level we need to manage. But having said that, we just can't say that we have to go on to a private cloud. We definitely need to somewhere take up public cloud, because if you do not adopt public cloud, then a lot of advantages which you get with the cloud really gets somewhere faded away. But having said that, as we all acknowledge that there are some challenges, there are some issues which still need to be, whether it is privacy, security, or jurisdiction, which is a very large issue per se, have to be addressed. I feel today we are perhaps in government quite ready to move on to a private cloud company. So we have large data center infrastructure, we have a very high speed network working in the country. If we even consolidate all of this, we are pretty at the place where we can move on to. We can start offering the cloud. But as in any governance application, just being technology ready is not sufficient. You need to perhaps do much more. I mean, if I really do whatever calculations I do, I feel technology perhaps contribute only 40% or maybe 30% to the success of adoption of a cloud into a certain setup or institution for them. So what perhaps we need to, which I think we need to do is, we need to have a lot of promotion, we need to have a lot of policy level initiatives around this cloud adoption to really make it happening in government per se. And while there are a number of issues, but one issue which I feel, only two issues which are very pertinent, I feel are that one is, particularly if you look at it, is the IT procurement within the government. I think the IT procurement process or policy with the government has to be aligned with the cloud stack. Today, for each project, we are buying independent hardware, which is being done in an independent administrative system. So that perhaps has to converge in some way. We have much senior people to get into what kind of structure that should be, but there definitely is a need to do something like this, whether it is a central procurement, particularly with respect to server infrastructure, with respect to infrastructure which is going to the delivery or data center part of it. Or we have some kind of overseeing multi-stakeholder kind of institution, committee or task force or whatever we may council may call, which should actually review all major IT procurements happening in the country, and that's where we should assess whether this application should go on cloud or it should have an independent setup. Because once we have that kind of thing, then only we will be able to accelerate this adoption within, even in the private. Because while saying private, we are ready, because lot of issues which we have been discussing become much less significant moment you have your own, within the government premises you have your cloud. And as we learn, we sure the other issues will be. Second thing which is also important is lot of applications which are being developed today. When we are talking of especially replicating from one government, one setup, one state government to other government, lot of applications today are not being developed which are cloud ready, which can truly leverage the potential of the cloud. So while we are doing this, I'm very glad that we are having this kind of architecture which will really guide the future applications. Somewhere there has to be some kind of an assessment system through which you see at least the applications which have applicability across various departments or various states for that matter, should be developed with a cloud-ready kind of architecture so that they could be tomorrow. So these two things I think are very pertinent than anything. Now, if you have to go on to a particular public cloud, the major problem which we see is that, though many of you will not agree, we do not have very good data center infrastructure in the private sector today in the country. Whether it is computing and more importantly the basic infrastructure, we have very, very small if you look at the requirements. So that perhaps has to jack up. And more importantly, then there has to be, because when you are putting up, there has to be some kind of assessment mechanism of these various infrastructures. I'm not saying government also has to, the private infrastructure, wherein one can say yes, it is complying with the kind of norms our IT Act is putting or our privacy regulations are there. So that system also has to come in place before we start going to start leveraging on the public cloud.